then asked me to come and talk about markets. I was like, what am I going to talk about? How long is a piece of string? However, over the last couple of days, we've seen the COP27, we've heard about it. Everyone's talking about climate change, but one of the things we find out is that a lot of things get said, but very little gets done. And one of the major constraints about success has always been money. Now, in terms of financing, as one or two people have mentioned already, they're the traditional ways. And I'll try and touch on a few areas of traditional finance, but towards the end, I'm going to switch it on you guys and give you an idea of where best we should be operating. Skip through this. Obviously, most of what we're talking about here has to do with the United Nations Sustainability Goals. From my perspective, some of the most important ones are obviously goal number 6, which is clean water and sanitation. Goal number 7, affordable and clean energy. Goal number 13, climate action. And goal number 14, life below water. Now, over several years, traditional means of finance have been put up. One of my sort of problems with traditional forms of finance is you still have to go with your begging bowl to somebody else to help you raise the money to do what's going to benefit you. And I think it's about time we start looking at alternative means of achieving some of the goals we're looking at here. However, touch on what we have already. We have green bonds. Green bonds are fixed income, liquid instruments that are used to raise funds, for climate mitigation, adaptation, and other environmental friendly projects. Interestingly enough, Nigeria launched its first green bond in 2017, which is 5 years ago. I'm yet to see the real impact of that. So these are some of the issues we're going to try and tackle later on here. The green bond was very general in its use. When parties go to raise money, obviously the funders tend to stipulate how it can be used, how the proceeds can be used, how it can be monitored, etc., etc. We have to jump through hoops and tick their boxes. And from my own point of view, the green bond was very, very general. Was very, very general in its targets. And something that came about much later was the blue bond. Now, I am very particular about what happens in the marine space and sea, simply because I do live on a beach full time. I have no other home in Nigeria. I live on a beach, believe it or not. I don't dress like this normally. I'm normally in shorts in Ankara. It's only when some VIPs like Akitunde Yusuf try and get me out of my comfort zone that I have to now go and look at the bottom of my box to look for the shoes I haven't worn for the last 10 years. So, the blue bond, not much different from the green bond, but it's actually targeted to raise capital from investors to finance marine and ocean-based projects that have a positive environmental, economic, and climate benefits. So it's more towards the beach and what we're trying to do there over time. So, like I said, now we're talking about beaches. We're talking about beaches which are currently littered with recyclable plastics, rusting shipwrecks that threaten our shorelines, as well as threatening the marine life that's out there. We also have a lot of discarded fishing nets, and the list goes on and on. It is another weapon in our arsenal to try and raise money for the projects. But it's still one of those instruments that we will need to use. We are going to be the beneficiaries. We still have to take our begging bowl to other parties for them to help us. There are other ways. So like I said, whatever kind of financing you're looking at, you still have to meet other people's criteria because they're the ones that are going to give you the money, be it international financial institutions such as World Bank, NGOs, etc., etc. And one of the big issues with this form of funding is quick disbursement. As you will find out, or some of you have already found out, putting together some of these funding packages could take several years. And obviously there is a cost to money. So there is no point in spending 2 years, 3 years to put together a financing package, and then you spend another 2 years trying to disperse the money. If you are ever going to go through the traditional route of financing, it is always important to have your project ready to go. So once the financing becomes available, you can hit the streets. If you're going to take the money and then put it in a bank and wait and twiddle your thumbs, it's not going to fly. So basically, in order to achieve this, there has to be a multifaceted approach whereby you're already looking at how the proceeds are going to be spent. When you get them, while another team is trying to raise the money, so as the money comes in, you can disperse it. I'm sure several people here already know that. Obviously, be it the green bond or the blue bond, environmental and social benefits need to be highlighted. They will stipulate these are conditions that will be attached to the issuance of that bond, and you will have to sort of highlight and sell the social benefits. In some cases, the finance you get will be, you will have to provide a return on investment, in which case, as you know, at some stage you need to get self-financing. Whatever project you're doing, at some stage, sooner or later, the odds are that project needs to be able to pay for itself. That tap will get turned off at some stage. And if that happens, or you run out of cash, and if that happens, it helps if the project itself is actually generating money. Obviously, before you kick off, you'll have a detailed prospectus, and obviously the Gestapo the police will come around and start looking at you for benchmarks to make sure you're hitting your targets, because what tends to happen is sometimes the money gets released in tranches, so you have to hit the first target, and then if you meet that, you get the second tranche. Potential sectors, ecotourism, fisheries, marine plastics, but we all know that. Let me move on to the interesting bit. The blue bond is already in existence and based on established criteria. However, we have now moved on into a digital age. Another form of financing in this age is carbon offsetting, although it does have its own issues. By definition, carbon offsetting is an action intended to compensate for the emission of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere as a result of human or industrial activity. Carbon offsets can fund specific projects that either lower carbon dioxide emissions or remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere for storage. It's very controversial, because what you currently have under the term of greenwashing, you have a situation whereby some of the biggest polluters, some of the corporations and any that create the biggest damage to our atmosphere try to buy their way out of reducing their emissions by saying, hang on a minute, we bought some carbon credits from some village in Papua New Guinea or in Nicaragua, and even though we're killing the atmosphere over here, we're still doing our bit because we bought some carbon credits from somewhere else. Overall, that doesn't ultimately reduce the overall effect, because what you lose, what you gain there, you lose here. You know, you're still damaging the atmosphere. There are integrity issues whereby there are certain parties that say before you can go into start purchasing carbon credits, you have to be seen to have done as much as possible to lower your own emissions, rather than just going out and purchasing carbon credits from a third party. So there are integrity issues. And this is the crux of the matter today. Most of the countries that were at COP27, particularly the African countries, they went there with their begging bowls. Yes, the rules have been set. United Nations Sustainability Goals. There were targets set at COP26, at COP25, and forever and a day. The targets are being set. But more often than not, we, the African countries, the third world countries, still have to go to first world nations to beg for money to improve our own environment and do our bit for to affect climate change. How can we create our own markets? Be it for carbon credits. Does it have to be carbon credits? Why not plastic credits or whatever credits? We don't have to necessarily follow that beaten track. We can take the framework and tune it or localize it to our own use such that we can do our own thing, raise our own money, create the benefits all within our own little ecosystem. What are the parties involved? How can we establish integrity? Now, I think Akitunde mentioned it earlier on. Voluntary carbon market initiatives tend to exist within national jurisdictions. So, we can form our own little markets that are Nigeria specific, not necessarily, toe the line with what the guys in the United States or Europe are saying. We can conform, there can be some correlation, but we can also do our own. So the purpose is to create the framework within which a party with excess carbon capacity within a country, within Nigeria, right, trades with a party within Nigeria that needs the credits. The excess credits offset by a company or corporation in Nigeria offsets the excess emissions of another party in Nigeria. We don't have to have a country in the United States purchasing carbon credits from us to sort of meet their conscience or meet their emissions targets. And trust me, there are a lot of funds globally that are dedicated to this. And that's why a lot of the international groups sort of, in order to access those funds, will turn around and say, hang on a minute, we meet certain green targets. We bought X amount of carbon credits from Nigeria. Meanwhile, they're still polluting so that they can access those funds. That doesn't help us one bit. We can create a cut market for carbon and plastic credits in Nigeria. What does an efficient market mean? An efficient market, number one, needs a standardized product to trade. A standardized product means it's the rules, dimensions, characteristics of that product are standard. So anybody that wants to come into those markets knows that they have to meet certain standards. So if you want to sell cement, you don't take oranges to a cement market, and you don't take cement to a plastic market. You have to have a standardized product. Reliable means to execute transactions. Obviously, money, credits, whatever's being exchanged, there has to be a reliable means. If you're trading credits, carbon credits, if you're trading plastic credits, if you're trading whatever, there has to be a means of exchange that is reliable. There are several ways of doing that in this environment. A robust means to perform novation or product oversight. Novation is not necessarily the main thing. Novation means, by novation I mean, this is my exchange background coming up. Novation is where an entity stands in the middle and ensures payment from the person that is buying and delivery from the person that is selling, and guaranteed. So what you pay for is what you get, and when you do sell something, you get paid what you agreed to get paid. Almost like a policeman ensuring everybody fulfills their obligations. Product liquidity. Liquidity means that if I buy something, for starters, there has to be a constant supply of the product, because in the market, because otherwise you do it once and it doesn't happen again. The beauty about carbon credits, and hopefully plastic credits, if that's the right term, is that they tend to get retired every year. So if I want to meet my carbon obligations this year, I buy carbon credits. Those carbon credits that I bought are for this year. They're for this year alone. Next year, I got to buy the same thing. So if I buy from Kitunde today, the chances are in a year's time, I'm going to come back to Kitunde to buy the same thing. You better have it. So you have to have the liquidity. Different participants, buyers, sellers, manufacturers, hedgers, and you'll see what I mean by that in the next slide. So, carbon credits and plastics. How do we expect the system to work? What products will be traded? What products can be traded? How can we trade these things? How do we establish a regular supply? And what are the benefits to the holder? Oops. Oh. No. I don't know how many pages I skipped there. Sorry. I'm jumping ahead of myself. Right, okay, so one more. Right, the product. What is the product? You can do carbon credits. Identify the areas. Kitunde mentioned it earlier on again. The mangrove forest, for example. These store so much carbon dioxide that it is very important that we do not destroy them. Otherwise, we're releasing a lot of damaging gases to the atmosphere, and if they're not protected, they could have reverse adverse effects of climate change. They need to be protected by law. The one thing we need to do in the creation of any market, any product, is to set the framework. The law. In terms of protection, we need to have the experts to verify what is being traded. You don't buy a product or try to sell a product that changes every time. There has to be certain criteria, standard criteria that can be met and adhered to, and they need to be monitored. If we have a standard product, whatever it is, we're already on the way to creating a market. So the question is this product going to be carbon credits, plastic credits? And I would tell you a little bit more about that now, because we have a situation. For example, let's talk about carbon credits and mangrove forests. If you're going to start looking at carbon credits, a certain amount of mapping needs to be done. The amount of carbon dioxide that is being emitted or stored by those forests need to be measured. The size of the area needs to be measured, carved up into smaller units. It's not, which are going to be traded. All this has to be standardized. And for example, for each standard area, for example, it be it 1 square meter. So if you have a situation whereby you've estimated the amount of carbon that can be stored in a particular area, and it's being carved up, each little piece represents a certain amount of carbon dioxide. If that is the case, this has to be verified. If there is be it an international verification agency or international experts, you guys know more about that than I do. But if it can be verified, then bottom line is each certificate If it's 1,000th of the total area in question, then each certificate will represent a certain number of units. And if each certificate represents a certain number of units, already that is a product. Because then if I buy that certificate, it sort of tells me that, hang on a minute, I have purchased so many carbon credits, but this has to be standardized. It doesn't mean that it has to be the exact one as what they're trading in America or in Brazil. If this is the way we're going to do it in Nigeria and each certificate represents this, then that's it. But then people know what they're buying. If they're going to buy 10 certificates, if they're going to buy 20 certificates, it represents a certain amount and for which they will expect to get the benefits thereof. And these benefits we're talking about, they come in different forms. In some countries, they get tax breaks. In some countries, it allows the purchaser to meet certain sustainability obligations, which in itself then opens up doors to other areas such as funding, etc., etc. So it's very important, number one, to identify the product, to verify the product with its characteristics, and obviously within a particular frame, a particular legal framework, be it the government that's going to give you tax breaks, be it just you, a company trying to meet certain goals. These monies can then be used to finance specific projects, be it something in the Mandela Forest, be it something in Israel, be it some Akitunde's trips to Badagry, cleaning the beach, etc., etc. I'm more interested in the plastic side, and I'll tell you why, obviously, because I live on the beach. Right. In terms of, I mentioned the mangrove forest, there's only a limited supply. So it is very important to be able to identify, if we're talking carbon credits now, the kind of assets that would be suitable, the amount of carbon that they represent. These will need to be verified, and there must be a standard mechanism for certification. So, because obviously this is what's going to be traded, and they're going to be traded on an annual basis because, like I said, they all get retired after every year. There is this issue about gas flaring in Nigeria, but that's a different matter. We still need to address that because that also causes significant damage to the environment. But I'd like to focus on plastics and more carbon credits, how we can carbon credits related to forests, the mangroves, etc., for this particular moment. Right. Plastics. Living on a beach, there's nothing worse than waking up in the morning and seeing the amount of discarded plastic bottles on the beach. They cause untold damage to what will be a national asset for the guys for the citizens of this country. Even on the beach, when we collect the plastic, we don't know what to do with it. And therein lies another opportunity, which I know one or two companies are already working on in the country, plastic to energy, recycling plastics, etc., etc. In order to do that, and I know Akitunde, God bless him, has already started this project, but it's scalable. There would need to be a standardized form of plastic that is exchangeable. This could be based on weight, it could be based on color, it could be based on other characteristics. I leave those to the chemist. And like I said, there could be more than one product to be traded here. So you could collect plastic. It could be used for energy. It could be used for recycling for more bottles. So even on the plastic side, there's a multi-purpose use for what is collected. As long as we know the kind of product that we're going to be trading. If we can have a standardized format for the collection of plastics, for example, we can create a market around it because it can be collected, it can be, what's the word I'm looking for? Separated, sorted. It can be collected, it can be sorted, be it into 1 ton packages or 100 kilogram packages or whatever, which can then be sold or traded, taken off the market. Certificates can be issued to companies for the amount of plastic they have taken out of circulation. And it's a multi-purpose, because if a company that is a plastic manufacturer, they could take the plastic off the market, get issued a certificate, and still use that plastic recycled for their product. So it's a double benefit for them. Likewise, energy companies that convert plastic to energy can buy the certificates and also get tax breaks for the simple fact that they get the certificates, but also they can also put the product that they've taken out of circulation into good use for their own benefit. So it's almost a double-edged point for them. Why they don't do it, I don't know. So like I said, suitable plastics can be collected, sorted, packed, crushed into suitable weights as stipulated by the market, as stipulated by the framework, as stipulated by the law or the experts who want specific specifications here. It will, like I said, it will require some logistical input by the participants, but it's not that difficult. Already, I know in Elisha, there are regular events where the school kids, the villagers, the locals actually go around, collect plastic. There are certain initiatives where school children are expected to bring so many bottles, such as this, to school every day, which are then packed. The proceeds of the sale, I mean, it's not done on a major scale, but it can be scaled up. And it doesn't have to be just Elisha. The kids do get the benefits, some of the benefits which we see Mr. Akitunde Bisu and his colleagues are doing. Most of you guys are involved. Like I said, the plastic bundles that meet the standardized requirements can be traded with manufacturers who can then recycle. Likewise, other entities can also purchase certificates, plastic credits. I don't know if the word exists, but I just use the word plastic credits, which they can then use to offset their plastic pollution in order to meet the net zero goals. What does this mean for us as Nigerians, or wherever it's been, whatever country? It leads to an alternative and cleaner form of energy, a cleaner environment, job creation, social benefits, and the list is endless. The point I am trying to make, the underlying point I'm trying to make here is we can create our own markets, create our own products, and the benefits are still maintained within our own little environment. We don't have to keep going abroad to say, please, can you give me this? Please, can you give me that? While at the same time, we are polluted. We are creating. There's a lot of money in plastics. There's a lot of money being wasted here. And it's still damaging our environment. We can do it ourselves. The Western world has given us a framework. We know what to do. Get the standardized. We need to get the manufacturers on board. We need to get the international agencies who can do the verification and guarantee that what we're doing is right. We need to get them on board. We need to get the government on board. Extremely important, because it's the government or regulator that is going to create the framework within which we're going to operate. But it can be done. It is being done, but if we're going to scale it up to become the kind of scale that would have significant impact, we're going to need the necessary laws put in place. And I mentioned this earlier. There was a blue bond that was issued, or was planned to be issued in Cape Verde, and even just putting the framework together took about 2.5 years, just to put the framework together. So the other point I'm trying to make here is, it is not when all the pieces are in place that we're going to start this journey. We don't wait until that time. We can start now, because even the whole process from 0 to 100 could take 3 to 5 years. So the earlier we start, which I know Mr. Kitunde Disu and his colleagues have started. So that has started, but you can do these things in tandem. So we need to sit down, identify what areas need to be addressed. What are we talking about in terms of product? How many, if it's plastics, how many units, what color, what specification? You will need to engage with the potential off-takers, be they manufacturers for recycling or energy producers to convert energy, plastic to energy. The logistical aspect of it. What are going to be the use of the proceeds? We need to talk about that. So there's so many things that can be done in tandem. The biggest mistake you can make is to wait till everything is in place before you start, because you'll never be in place. It's when you start, you think, oh, then you realize it's not in place. You need to start now, start working on them. These things are fluid. You start now, you think, oh, the plastic credits will consist of this. The proceeds will be A, B, C. If it changes along the way, so be it. You're fluid. But we need to start now. So I just mentioned a few of the stakeholders. The stakeholders, you can't do this without the government, because the government are going to create the law. In financial market terms, we call them regulators. But the government will need to be involved from the very beginning. So engagement with the relevant authorities, be it federal, local, state. Well, it's the other way around. You start with the local, then the state, then the federal, to get their buy-in and their support. We're going to need international bodies to help us with the product design and how we're going to verify it, and to identify the underlying assets that we can use, because it's important that the ultimate beneficiaries of any funds raised ends up with the people that we intended to do in the first place. Like I said, Nigeria launched its first green bond in 2017, and I can tell you, as a banker, I don't know where that money went, because I don't see the benefits on the street. So it's important that the money channels to where it goes. You need to identify the relevant communities, which I'm sure shouldn't be too difficult. In terms of the plastics, it's important to engage with the manufacturers and the energy firms. They're going to be the ultimate buyers of these plastic credits or the products that are taken off the beach, for example. They will be the benefits. You take so many tons of plastic off the beach, take them out of circulation, you get a plastic certificate for this. The benefits of that plastic certificate are tax rates, etc., etc. These things need to be stipulated and identified. The international financial community institutions, you can't do without them, because they will put in, they will come, if they see that we're doing this kind of thing, they will come in and give us a little bit extra money. So let's keep them involved. So, in concluding, it's important to create a framework with the relevant stakeholders who I've just mentioned. Identify the relevant agencies, including international financial institutions such as World Bank, African Development Bank, etc., etc., etc. They're willing to support these things. They're there. Let them know what you're doing. They can lend resources. They will walk with you. They will hold your hand where necessary. There is no I in team. So it's not a case of I did it. Work with them for the ultimate benefit of the communities. Mapping, especially in terms of carbon credits, is very, very essential. You need to identify the forests that you need to protect. You cannot protect forests without the support of government. You need to be able to identify whether it's in Taraba State, Lagos State, Ogun State, River State, wherever. identify them, get the buy-in of the government, map the areas so that you can say to the government, this area needs to be protected, we need to do it by law, this is what we're going to do. So you need to carry them along. Those are the regulators. And like I said, for plastics, you need to identify the relevant off-takers, agree on the product so that if they want clear plastic without the paper wrappers, you know that when you pack these plastics, you take off the paper wrappers. They don't want the blue covers, take off the blue covers. Those guys that want the blue covers will take the blue covers. The guys that want the clear plastic will take the clear plastic. Make sure that the product that you are trying to sell to the off-takers, for which they're getting carbon credits, or for which they are buying to convert to energy, meets the specifications that they want or they expect. Tomorrow night, you don't wait till tomorrow to do this. We start collecting the relevant data as requested, by verification. It's important. We engage with the authorities. We discuss the data that we need. We start to collect that now. Now, more importantly, talking about verification, I'm not a blockchain guru, but I know the many here. It's worth a deep dive to ascertain whether blockchain technology can be used. I believe it can be used for this, even if it is simply for the verification process. The blockchain guys can figure that out themselves, but I believe blockchain, not trading crypto, but blockchain technology itself has a role to play in this. My advice would be the guys with the knowledge, take a deep dive into it, see what role blockchain can play in this. I know, even if it's just for the verification of the assets, or verification of who holds the certificates, verification to make sure that there's no doubling up. So when you purchase certificates, it's important to know that those certificates haven't been sold by somebody else and somebody else is using them. It's not my area of expertise, but there's a role to be played. Very important. Appreciate that the process of setting up a market could take several years. I mean, I've created products, financial products, in Nigeria, that even in the UK, we created a product called CFDs, Certificates for Difference, which are derivative products. This was we started trying to create these in 1996, and we didn't trade the first product till about the year 2000. That was in England. It took 4 years. Like I said, the Cape Verde bond, I think, took several years just for the verification process. So appreciate that the process will take several years. I think we need to start today. I try not to go into too much detail because I know there's a whole different array of people here, but if you want to start talking astrophysics or you want to sort of take a deep dive into more detail, I am always available. I'm going to be hanging around here for a few more hours, and Akitunde Bisu has my details, and I will be glad to help. Anything that's going to make a difference to us, the environment we live in and our kids, I'm all for it. Thank you very much.